Hello everybody and welcome to our webinar. Thank you for coming. I know the participants are just joining us, but we're quite tight for time, so we will get going. So I'm Monica Fletcher. I'm part of the Asthma Centre for Applied Research, and my role within the centre is partnerships and advocacy work. And this webinar has come out of a piece of work that we've done for the centre and has been based on research from members of our network. So where next for digital tools in asthma care? I've got a little bit of housekeeping to announce first, and that is that this webinar is being recorded. Unfortunately, people can't always make the time that we arrange these things. So although it's great to have you all online, we are also going to be recording this. So just to let you know that. And unfortunately, the other thing with a large webinar like this is that we can't ask you to come off mute to ask questions, which I know is a little bit frustrating for you. But we do have the question and answer box. I'm sure you're familiar with that, but if not, go into the Q&A and you can type a question to us. We'll be keeping an eye on that, and during the process, if there are similar questions that people have asked or you want to push those questions up into a priority, you can, what we call these days, upvote your favourite question. So our panel, I'd like to let them introduce themselves, but we do have a fantastic panel here to have a discussion. This is going to be mainly a discussion. There's a brief presentation from myself, and then Professor Hilary Pinnock will also give a perspective from a GP and an asthma researcher. But our panel is here to really embellish the discussion, and as I say, you will get an opportunity also to ask the members of the panel. So first of all, I'd like to ask Naomi Bennett-Steele if she'd mind introducing herself. So Naomi, over to you.
Thanks, Mon, and hi everyone. Good afternoon, just about. My name is Naomi. I am the Innovation Partnerships Manager at Asthma Lung UK. So I spend a lot of time speaking to innovators and also people with asthma about what they want from innovation, where innovation's going. And yeah, really pleased to contribute to the conversation today.
Lovely, thanks Naomi, and great to get the perspective from Asthma Lung UK. Bill, I wonder if you could say hi, apart from being a West Ham supporter who's feeling very jolly today. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, hi everyone, my name's Bill. I'm a lifelong asthmatic is my main interest here. I've been volunteering with a UK car for nearly 10 years, which is unbelievable now, just as a patient public involvement, really, just to see what's going on, and it's all very interesting. I'm very interested in technology and how it can help people manage their own symptoms. Yeah, so this should be quite interesting.
Brilliant, thanks Bill. And Sue Lang, hi.
Hi, I'm Sue. I was diagnosed with asthma as a child. And over the years, I've researched ways of sort of helping to self-manage it myself. I've also started doing a lot of involvement with Asthma Lung UK on various webinars and patient panels.
Lovely, welcome you, Sue, and thank you for attending. And finally, but not least, Hilary Pinnock. Hi, Hilary.
Yes, I'm Hilary Pinnock, and as Mon has already said, I'm a GP by background. And the Professor of Primary Care Respiratory Medicine in Edinburgh, where I've been working with the Asthma UK Centre for many years, since it first started. My real interest, my research interest, is around how we deliver care. And obviously digital is very much an increasing part of that. So that's become an increasing interest for me. And the type of research I do is a sort of implementation research, where we look at how care is delivered and how we implement novel ways of looking after people with asthma. So this is very much my interest.
Thanks, Hilary. Just to tell you a little bit about the centre that Bill and Hilary have referred to, the Asthma UK Centre for Applied Research has been, as Bill said, in existence now for about 10 years. It will be 10 years next year. We have been funded primarily from Asthma UK and then Asthma and Lung UK, but we've also drawn in funding from many other grants and opportunities during that time. Our research focus is the prevention of asthma attacks. So for those patients out there, that obviously is really important to you, and also optimizing the management of asthma attacks. So not only can we prevent those, but actually what do we do for patients who do have asthma attacks? Our centre is all about patients. We have patients, as you can tell on the call today, but patients are involved throughout our research. And we have sort of 4 parts of what we're doing. It's about systems for engagement, which is about the work that we're doing now, getting our research out into the public and into the broader arena of academia. Postgraduate training, so we have PhD students and MSc students. We have a really strong core infrastructure behind what we're doing, and we are constantly producing many research outputs. Our work is, as I say, it's really about not only about the actual research that we're doing, but it's actually about making that research out there to get into practice and policy, as well as producing many academic publications. And what our real research that we've been focusing over this time is about supported self-management, personalised treatments for patients, diagnosis and clinical management, identifying the people who are most at risk of asthma attacks and controlling those risk factors, and where we can, helping patients to follow the treatment regimes as they're prescribed. And I probably don't need to tell you, because you're an interested audience, but asthma is a big issue for us in the UK and also globally. It affects 5.4 million people in the UK. That's 1 in every 12 adults and 1 in every 11 children. In fact, it's the most common long-term condition of childhood. It costs a lot of money, at least £1.1 billion per year. So there is constantly work that we can be doing, as Hilary said, about implementation of research. How do we actually change practice? And this paper will be referred to during today, but we're very proud that many members of our group who are involved in a Cochrane review, which suggests that digital interventions may help people with managing their asthma better, and also adhering to their therapies, leading to better quality of life. And it's not just us that are sort of purporting that this is important. It's also in guidelines, both by Asthma and Lung UK, but also by the GINA guidelines. And as I say, can improve outcomes, improve quality of care, and reduce the environmental impacts of asthma. And what do we mean by digital tools? Well, there's a whole range that we're talking about here, and this will come out in our discussion today. They can help prevent, diagnose, treat asthma. They can help assess inhaler technique, which is a big issue that we face still. They can help you monitor your medications and support managing your asthma. So they include things like mobile apps, inhaler monitors, smartwatches, smart peak flow meters, smart inhalers, a whole range of different devices that are currently out there, and many that are still in development today. So this is a real growth area, not just in asthma, but across healthcare generally. And they can also help you with speaking to your health professionals, and as health professionals speaking to your patients. And we've got to think very broadly when we're thinking about digital sort of technologies. Remote consultations came into their own. I think we saw a mushrooming, and Hilary might want to speak about this later, during COVID, and we learned a lot of lessons during that time. So it may be that for some of you patients there, that actually having remote consultations can improve your asthma care or improve your access to a healthcare professional. So the evidence from the centre, what we've done is we've looked at the research that over the last 10 years that we've been doing, and many of that research forms fell into different sort of clusters. And we saw that there was a lot of work from our students and from our collaborators on digital technology, digital interventions, as I've just described. And we've produced a policy and practice brief called Where Next for Digital Tools in Asthma Care. I know this is very small, where I'll be giving you a link, so don't worry about reading this. It's always a bit frustrating. We have something on the slide and think that's a bit small, but essentially what's in there are recommendations for people with asthma, policymakers, healthcare professionals, and asthma researchers. And under each of those, we've made some recommendations as to what we feel coming out of the research that we've actually produced, what might be a really important things to move forward with improving asthma care. So the recommendations for the patients, and this webinar has got a really broad audience here, but I know we've got quite a few patients on here. I've just picked out the one for patients. So what we're asking of patients is really to think about asking your GP, your respiratory nurse, your pharmacist about the different digital options available for you. So that may help you manage your asthma better. And many of you may well have discovered these on your own. You may have looked at them on the internet. You may have found out from friends, family, other recommendations. But it is worth you asking your nurse and your healthcare professionals, as I've alluded to, what do they know about it? And are there any that they might know about that they might recommend? So at the moment, I think there's a bit of a push and pull. There's a bit about patients asking for these things, but there's also a bit about healthcare professionals and others being able to have that dialogue so that we can start to really move forward in respiratory. And also, if you have a preference as a patient, it might be worth you asking your practice if a telephone or a video, a consultation or a face-to-face, which of those is most appropriate for you to review your asthma. And there were many years where we felt that it was not possible to be able to necessarily do this by video consultation. And many practices were quite slow for lots of different reasons, concerns about, the quality of care, etc. But there's been quite a bit of evidence now built up that your consultation can be equally as effective. Not the same for everybody, but equally effective for some patients to do this online. So I just want to put a quick poll out to those of you out there, and we'll come back to the results of these in a moment. But do you currently use digital tools in any way to manage your asthma? And if you could possibly answer that question, we'll come back to this in a little bit. So straightforward question, yes or no. So do you use, from what I've just described as digital tools, do you use those for managing your asthma? And if you could just put a little tick on that. I think as it's a yes or no, Claire, I think we're probably ready just to move on there.
I can share the results if you want.
Okay, you can, that'd be fab. So at the moment, we've got more going for a no, and we'll have a conversation and with you and find out the reasons behind that, and whether or not later on you might think it could help you with your asthma. So thank you very much, Claire, that's great. So I'm now going to move on and introduce you to Hilary again. I mean, Hilary has introduced herself, but just to say that we are now going to have a bit of a perspective from a healthcare professional, and Hilary know better to be able to do that for us, who is going to share with you, some of the considerations from perspective of a GP about whether digital tools in asthma, her experience, and open up a discussion. So over to you, Hilary. Thank you.
Thank you, Mon. I'm very interested in that poll because it is about 20 years since I published a paper in the BMJ suggesting that telephone reviews for asthma could be equally effective. So it has taken 20 years and only 25% of people, wasn't it, said that they used digital technology of any, or technology of any sort. So interesting how long it takes to get things into practice. Okay. So what I've been asked to talk about is to look at this from a primary care GP perspective. And I guess I'd sum it up by saying, you know, who 3 years ago, before we had a pandemic, would have believed that the first hour or so of my surgery, when I go in on a Friday morning, looks like this. Sitting in front of screens and talking on a phone with people who want contact on the same day. That is actually now the norm, I think, in most practices. We do our face-to-face consultations later on. And of course that has some advantages. It has huge advantages for people. It has advantages for people who are busy at work or with a family. It's a pain bringing a whole pile of children into the surgery you've got to look after, and it's difficult. Elderly people who have difficulty getting in, who perhaps need to arrange for lifts and things if they're going to come in face to face. Many people hugely value the potential of remote consulting. There are some disadvantages, and I'm talking here from a GP perspective. I'm sure there are some disadvantages from the patient perspective, but from my perspective, I've had some really extraordinary telephone consultations with people standing in a checkout queue and trying to have a consultation, or possibly even worse for my nerves, people who are actually driving at the same time, and I'm constantly listening out to make sure they hadn't crashed their car as well as talk to me. So there are some real issues, I think, around the implementation of this. More recently, of course, we've started with a video consulting, and hospitals in particular have taken this on board. And there's a lot you can do with a video consultation. Obviously, you can see people, maybe that improves the empathy. But we actually showed in a little piece of work just before the pandemic, actually, that you could actually share your screen with the NHS technology and complete an action asthma plan together. So, you know, there's more that you can do with video conferencing. But there are challenges, and the reason it's not been taken up very much in primary care, the first one is that we didn't originally have webcams. You can see I've got a webcam on one of my screens in the picture now. But I didn't originally. None of our computers, none of our screens had webcams. Why would they? We didn't need them. So to start with, we were trying to conduct these consultations using our own mobiles and sending links out to both parties. That was problem number one. Problem number two is that how is it that 3 years after we start a pandemic and everything's moved online, we still cannot look straight into cameras? We still cannot frame ourselves in a picture. And one of the problems is we were spending a lot of time troubleshooting these problems, helping people to find their unmute button. And it was taking a lot of time out of the consultation. And it became very frustrating, I think, for lots of us. And a lot of us went back to telephone consultations instead. Online consultations, some of you may have tried these out in your local surgery, where you fill in the information you want to ask about and you may get a response, and that response could be a quick reply. It could be to make an arrangement for a telephone call or a face-to-face call. So it's a way into the clinical practice. One of the things that really works is the ability to text people. We use this all the time as an adjunct to either our remote reviews, where I can, for example, request a photograph or some further information with a text message, or I can send a link to information or clips of inhaler techniques or things. I can send that after my consultation, and I do that after face-to-face consultations as well as after telephone calls. The second thing I wanted to look at is around improving adherence, and you've already seen the picture of this Cochrane review that Amy Chan did. She's a member of our Asthma UK Centre. Now, those of you who are not familiar with forest plots, don't panic. These are very simple, even though they look a bit complicated. All you need to know is that if all the dots and the lines and the diamonds are on the right-hand side, then digital care is better. And if they're on the left-hand side, then usual care is better. This forest plot looks at adherence. And as you can see, just about all the dots and lines are on the right-hand side, suggesting that digital care can improve adherence to using inhalers. But there's more than one sort of digital care. One is smart inhalers, becoming more and more available these days. And that increased adherence a huge amount, actually, 22.5%. That's a big increase in adherence. Text messaging and reminders could also improve adherence, about 12%. And what I would regard as irritating automated telephone calls, amazingly, also improved adherence, 7.6%. So quite significant improvements. And as Mon has already alluded, that actually translated into improved asthma control and probably also increased quality of life. So some evidence that we can use digital technology to not only improve adherence, but that of course is a means to improving control. I think we will see more of this in the future. So what about supported self-management? One of the things I'm most interested in, well, of course, digital world has opened up a whole world of information from Asthma Lung UK, also from the European Lung Foundation. Endless sources of information. Perhaps the most difficult thing is for people to know when they're looking at a reputable source of information, and perhaps that's something we need to think about, how we signpost that. I've already talked about smart inhalers improving adherence, but there are also a lot of digital resources to help inhaler technique, videos to show you how to use it. But these days we've got AI-based systems where you can use an app and record yourself using the inhaler, and it will tell you how you're performing. So there are and some of these are coming in the pipeline. So we've got digital ways of supporting inhaler technique. Of course, there are hundreds of apps for fitness generally. If you want to quit smoking, lose weight, do more exercise, those apps are all there. This is some work around breathing technique. Some years ago, Mike Thomas and other colleagues from the Asthma UK Centre did some work that showed that if you've got difficulty with your breathing, then breathing retraining can help control that. Originally, this was done face-to-face or on a DVD. That is now old-fashioned technology, and it's now being updated for an online version. This particular Breathe for T is designed for teenagers, but I'm sure this is going to be the way forward. You can, of course, monitor anything and everything with an app, including your asthma care. There are many apps that do this. The big problem, however, is that very, very few of them actually tell you what to do about it if your control is deteriorating. And one of the big barriers at the moment is that you can't, there are no very few apps have actually an action plan and translate the readings into you should do this. There are medico-legal reasons for that which need to be overcome. And indeed, Asthma UK, this has come from the Asthma UK website, they suggest you take a photo of your action plan from the paper version on your phone so you can share it, but that really isn't using technology to its best advantage. And finally, my final point, that really for the future, all this is available. What is not available is any connectivity between them and interoperability between them. So people may have 4 or 5 or 6 different apps doing different things by the time they've got their pollen count, their exercise, their information, their monitoring. This needs connectivity, and we're quite a long way off an interoperable system that I think could benefit people living with asthma. So, a few thoughts, and I'll be interested in some feedback.
Lovely, thank you, Hilary. That's great, and we've got our panel back together. So feel free to come off mute, but there is a bit of background noise I can hear, so do be aware of that. Some of you are picking up a little bit of background noise, so just an immediate sort of reflection. I'm going to ask Bill and Sue, really, your views on anything that Hilary has said just before we start looking at the other questions and winding this out. Bill, I don't know about yourself. Have you got any initial comments from a patient's perspective about anything that Hilary has just said?
Yeah, well, I agree wholeheartedly with pretty much everything you said, Hilary, and it's mainly, my view of it is the technology is all there, everything's available, but it's just not working together. And it's kind of, you know, I'm a user of smart watches, smartphones, like everybody is these days, and it all kind of just works. You don't have to think about it. Whereas the asthma apps are available. There are some great ones available, but they don't. One does good at something, one's good at something else, and they need to be joined up. And I mean, I've been scribbling away here. I've got a wish list like 3 pages long of what I would like an app to do, which is, you know, I think probably years away. But then when I think about technology, you know, who would have thought you'd have everybody be walking around with a computer in your pocket 10 years ago? So maybe it's not a pipe dream that this could all happen very quickly. You know, and getting to, I mean, to my mind, information is everything in asthma, in supporting your self-management. You know, short of somebody creating a miracle cure, all you can do is be informed and manage your own symptoms with support. So technology can help you do that, because I find if you've got, you mentioned weight loss apps, if you're keeping a track of what you eat, all of a sudden it becomes very apparent where you're going wrong. And I think that speaks for pretty much everybody who's ever tried it. If you start digitally collecting everything you eat every day, all of a sudden it's obvious why you can't lose that extra half a stone you want to do. So, and it's the same with asthma. If you can keep your peak flow every day for a month, that's a lot more useful than doing it once every 6 months. And it will become obvious when you're beginning to have a problem. And I mean, my pipe dream for me would be that I use an app which I can reorder inhalers on. Well, if that was linked to my GP in a way that they could say, well, actually, you've used your inhaler too much, because now an automatic order's gone in for a new one, so therefore we're going to get in touch with you. And that to me seems, I mean, it does actually happen, but at the moment it requires a good GP who's on the ball looking at it. So that could be a really easy automated win for everybody, really. But yeah, so yeah, I mean, I could go on and on and on. There's lots of things I think it could do, and they all do it, but it needs, as you said, that was the one big thing I took from your closing comments, was it all needs to be joined up and work together a bit. I'll let Sue speak. I'll go on and on.
No, that's great, Bill. Thank you. And I think you're raising lots of questions there. I mean, I like the thing we'll come back to, but pattern recognition, I think, is quite an important thing you've sort of highlighted there, identifying early problems, etc. Just before I sort of throw this open a little bit more, I'd just like to get Sue's initial reaction to what Hilary said, or your views on digital tools or experience.
I mean, yeah, I'm in favour of digital tools. I don't know, I've looked into self-management a lot. I do a lot of meditation and yoga and stuff like that, which helps my breathing, which has been suggested by my surgery. I'm lucky with my doctors in as much as they're quite, how can I say, forward thinking. I don't know how you want to explain it. With what was just said about reordering inhalers and that, with my surgery, if you do reorder inhaler, you can do it via your pharmacy. If the doctor picks up on it, they will come back to you and say, no, you're not having that because you need your assessment done. They are very up on what you're taking. They will sort of come back to you and say, right, you need to come over because we're not happy with what's happening. I went over a while back and I was introduced to the Asthma Hub, which is what the nurse suggested to me. So they do sort of push on the technology side. The worry I have is, how do you know a lot of people would worry about what's good, because there's so many apps out there. How do you know, are you taking something that's going to work? And the other thing is technophobe. You know, it's not everybody is sort of happy using technology, and that's the other concern I have. Up until COVID, I never used a computer. You know, I would never be happy sitting in front of a computer. So not everybody is happy with that aspect, but I love it now. It's the best thing that happened as far as I'm concerned. I would never do this in public. I am much more comfortable sitting in front of a computer talking than getting up in a room and talking to people. And I'm much more comfortable going online or on the phone to my doctor than going into the surgery.
So that's an amazing transformation, Sue, and thank you so much for sharing that. And I mean, Hilary, I don't know, a lot of people have actually, have concerns about talking to their GP in this way. I don't know what your experience has been from a GP's perspective talking to patients.
Yeah, I mean, it's horses for courses. Some people are more comfortable with remote, other people just don't like it at all, and that's where preference comes in. It's not only preference has to be based, and choice of mode of consultation has to be based on the clinical situation. If it's seriously ill, for goodness sake, we need to see you face to face. If there's a major problem, let's get down together around a table and sort it out. But if it's a routine review, if you're more comfortable that way, yeah, let's choose to do it remotely. And I think it's a choice based on the individual, and that depends on the GP. We have personalities too. It's the GP's personality, it's the patient's personality, and it's the problem they wish to discuss together. And it has to be flexibility.
Yeah,
absolutely agree.
So one of the things that Bill raised, and I think it's quite interesting because there was a very interesting discussion last week on radio I was listening to. You've been talking about using this as sort of pattern recognition. You don't know about what you're eating if you record it all down in a log. People will record their spirometry. In fact, one of the questions that got raised earlier, one of the questions was related around, well, if I'm doing this, will I be building stress? If I'm constantly doing my spirometry or whatever, does it build stress? And I heard something very, very interesting about people who have Fitbits and monitoring their sleep, that actually that can also make people not sleep because they're thinking they've had a good night's sleep, and then they look on here and they say, oh, I've only had 5.5 hours sleep, I feel terrible. But actually they thought they'd had a good night's sleep. So I just wonder about this, the advice to patients, and I'm going to bring Naomi in a little bit with some of the research that you've been doing with Asthma and Lung UK, but this sort of feeling about, how will it build stress? Will it be helpful? Can you see how it could be, become not addictive in a way, or should it be used constantly or during periods of time? So maybe throw that back to you first, Bill, because you kind of raised this thing.
I think it's quite possible, and just, anecdotally, I've got a 22-year-old daughter, and amongst their friends, they're all a little bit skeptical of using one. I won't name it, but there's one particular app everybody uses for monitoring what they're eating. Mm-hmm. And they're all saying that this can take over your life and it's running everything for you, and you mustn't use it because it's too rigid. So there's obviously different personalities. It's, personally, I like it all. But I found that quite interesting that, say, my young daughter said that all the young girls are now coming off of using this particular app because they're finding it is almost not causing anorexia, but it's that kind of way it's making them feel, that they're monitoring their food too rigidly. So there is obviously some opposition to these things. And I guess it's like everything in life, it needs to be used sort of sensibly and not... I still think information, with an illness like asthma, so there's not going to be a miracle cure tomorrow. So the much information you can arm yourself with, the better, in my opinion. Yeah.
And Hilary, do you think there are particular times of being diagnosed, getting people started? What's your experience?
I do. I am very interested in these comments. There's a comment on the chat actually about, can you overuse digital tools? And Roberta is really quite concerned that this can be overdone. A lot of people actually do the opposite. They use it, they monitor themselves for about a day and a half and then stop. So this constant monitoring is absolutely not for everybody. For some people, it suits them well. I'm not saying it's wrong, but for many, many people, for lots of reasons, it doesn't. And the thing I'm actually interested in, Mon, is the idea that we need to move probably towards a more passive monitoring system. Asthma is a variable condition by definition. It's troublesome at times, it's not so troublesome at others. And maybe we need to move to a situation where we have the technology to passively monitor. For example, if you hardly ever wake at night with your asthma because you're well controlled, if all of a sudden you start using your reliever inhaler at 4 o'clock every morning, and particularly if you've been coughing more than usual, is it not time for your phone, when you wake it up in the morning, to say, I see you used your inhaler in the middle of the night. Is your asthma in trouble? Is it time you monitored it again? And maybe it's time we were just that much more intelligent about the monitoring. Most people don't want to monitor all the time. A few do, and a few probably get really upset because they're overusing it.
And I think what's also very interesting there, Hilary, is that, and I think you've been involved in some of these trials, or if not some of the discussions, is actually using things like sound as well, and cough monitors, and, you know, using Alexa to pick up, you know, change in voice,
Exactly.
you know, all sorts of other things, which is a kind of a passive, you're not doing it, it's picking it up for you. So.
And it's just saying, wake up, something's wrong,
Yeah.
do something, monitor your asthma, think about your asthma, go to your action plan.
Naomi, time to bring you in a little bit to the discussion, and I alluded to some of the work that you were doing, but I just wonder, before you do that, any thoughts and comments that that, you know, to augment what's been said already, or to add to the discussion?
Yeah, it's really interesting that bits of what everyone has said is actually really reaffirming what we found when we've done our research in this area. So over the last couple of years, we've been doing a lot of work just trying to listen to people with asthma and hear how they approach their self-management, how do they feel about it, what are the barriers to self-managing. And what we found from that, from speaking to thousands of people, is that actually there's kind of roughly 3 approaches that people take. There's some people who are maybe quite had a diagnosis quite recently. They don't necessarily have really severe symptoms, and they're not particularly motivated to manage their asthma day to day. They're not particularly motivated to monitor, and I think that's where Hilary's comments about passive monitoring comes in, because if you're asking that person to do something every day, they're just not going to do it because they're not interested. And then there's two other sort of personas that we've been working on. One of them, I think, if I can say, Bill fits very well, which is that he's got a routine. He's really interested in technology and his management, but he's only interested if it's going to do something well and it's going to improve or help what he's already doing. If it's going to hinder him, he's not that bothered. Not to put words in your mouth, Bill, hopefully, but that's the impression that I've got. And we found that there is a group of people with asthma that fit into that, but quite often they're in the minority, because there's quite a lot of people who are disengaged. And then also, which has been highlighted by a couple of comments in the Q&A section, that people can get really overwhelmed when they're given this job to do every day, and actually encouraging them to monitor even more can send them in a bit of a spiral about stressing about their numbers. And we see this particularly, to give another example, people trying to innovate in COPD. So obviously a different lung condition, but we know that that's a progressive disease. So showing people their numbers actually is really disencouraging for them. And so particularly when people are quite anxious about their asthma, maybe they've struggled with their symptoms, they've recently had an exacerbation, encouraging them to monitor more might not be a helpful thing to do. And so actually, those are 3 very, very different approaches that are needed to helping people manage in the best way possible for them.
And so, as a GP, how will Hilary tell what type of patient that she has in front of her, or how does that discussion manifest, Hilary? And I'll bring Sue into this as well. But Hilary, that's interesting hearing the work that Naomi and the team have done.
Absolutely. You talk to people, actually. Good old-fashioned general practice. We talk to people and ask them how they feel. What would be their preference? I don't think there's any subject. It's good to have knowledge about what we might be looking for in terms of people's personalities, but first thing to do is just talk and ask and work together to find a suitable solution right for them. And for me, remember, I'm a person too, so that I have, I have preferences for how I deal with people. Some of my colleagues are very keen on digital. Some prefer to see people face to face. This is a human interaction.
Yeah. And Sue, do you feel, I know you say with your own practice and your experience of your practice, but I know you've been involved in quite a lot of work with other patients. Do you think patients as a whole would feel confident asking their healthcare professional about digital tools? Or
Not everybody, no. I mean, I've had a lot of people who said to me that they don't find their surgery is as good as mine. I mean, I can't comment on that, but I mean, I'm confident to go in and talk into my surgery because they do listen. I mean, when I went over for my assessment, I said to the nurse that I have trouble doing my peak flow monitor, and she said to me that there are a lot of people who sort of like do struggle with that because they're not able to use the diaphragm in the right way. But she takes in what people are saying. She listens. She asks questions and she listens. But I know a lot of people who are not that lucky.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. One of I think Roberta again has made a comment that she's obviously been using a digital spirometry in some ways, and I don't know whether her GP isn't. She says her GP isn't interested in the numbers, but her consultant is. And again, Hilary, this is about experience. It's about interest. It's about knowing the important. It's just very different from different healthcare professionals' perspectives as well.
Yeah, and our context.
Yeah.
You see, I don't know anything about Roberta, but if you are under a secondary care clinic, particularly if you're under a severe asthma clinic, for example, your consultant that is what they do. Your consultant and the specialist nurses there are focused on asthma. So and I think I saw somewhere in one of the comments that Roberta was actually prescribed the digital inhaler. Fine, because the person who's prescribed it for her, presumably secondary care, they had access to the monitoring facilities, and they only had one system that they were monitoring, and that was the asthma one with the inhalers that they prescribed. Now, if I were to do that, I look after every disease, and every single disease. I have not got the time to get myself onto every single disease app and every version of every app, all of which of course will require a password and all sorts of other complications because they don't integrate with my system. You can see why GPs are going to say they're not interested. Not that they're not interested in the numbers, it's just that there's no practical way of getting those numbers to us in a way that is going to actually work. If I told you that this is blood pressure, the example I'm going to give you, but it's a similar thing, when we implemented blood pressure home monitoring in Lothian, we fed the information back to the GPs on a PDF that went in through our normal system for letters coming into the practice, so that GPs didn't have to log into anything. We need to work out how. It's implementation research. How do we make it happen?
And there's a question about this then. So we're saying we need to, I mean, who do we think needs to be doing this? It's, how can we sort of drive this joining up? Because I'm getting the impression from talking to you all individually that you think it's a good idea. I've got two patient perspectives here and representing broader perspective. We've got Naomi's research, got Hilary's research. Who should be driving this forward? How can this really take its next step, Hilary? I know you talk about implementational research, but how can we make it different for patients listening here or health technologists listening here in a month's time or 6 months' time? I mean, what can be done?
Your timescale is ambitious, given that it took 20 years to get 20 years and a pandemic to get telephone reviews on the agenda. Your timescale of 6 months is probably ambitious. We all need to be thinking about it. Naomi, I think your advocacy is really important from patient groups. Patients have a lot of power and influence, and I think your advocacy is really important here. Professionals like me saying, yeah, great, but it's no good giving me 50 or 60 different apps to follow online. I'm not going to do it. So we need to get those messages across. Actually, this is something that really matters and is of increasing interest professionally as well as amongst patients. I don't know whether you know, Mon, but I am now leading what's called a clinical research collaboration with the European Respiratory Society. It's called Connect, and it's called Connect because our aim is to move this agenda of interoperability and connectivity forward and implementation. I still think, even with my Connect CRC, 6 months is going to be ambitious, but it would be good if it was less than 20 years.
Bill, do you have a comment?
It's more of a comment on experience, really, of remote consulting that I have had, which I feel very lucky that I was very ill 10 years ago and got put under a London hospital with a severe asthma clinic, and thanks to them, I'm absolutely fine now, touch wood. But going back before COVID, my consultant said to me, you don't need to be coming in here all the time for these reviews, because he bigged me up as a professional patient, and that I've had asthma all my life. I know what the symptoms are. I know what to look out for. When I used to go, I would get weighed. I would do peak flow, SpO2 on the finger, and then sit and talk to him, tell him I'm fine for 10 minutes, and then go home. He said, we can do all this over the telephone. But I've also got the chief or the lead asthma nurse's telephone number with the instruction that if I ever need to actually see them, give her a ring and they'll get me in the next clinic. And, you know, I've not been for 4 years, but it's always there, and I'll speak to them. And one of the worries that some people always come up with, that all this kind of stuff, is this will lead to health inequalities, where people with less technical ability, less ability to maybe describe their symptoms over the telephone, just don't feel like describing their symptoms over the telephone or face to face, or whichever way around. Well, the way it was described to me, he said, by you and other people who we trust to report to us when you need to, and when we do have a consultation, you can give us good information so we can make a decision on what you do or don't need to do. That frees up clinic time for less able people. So it's not creating an inequality, it's solving it in some ways. But the problem comes in, I've said this before, I think, to you, that the asthma nurse there runs this clinic. She's a wonderful lady. If she got hit by a bus tomorrow, I've got no idea what would happen, because it is entirely on her, almost everything. So that's where technology needs to step in and give her a bit of a break somehow. Yeah.
But it's also actually the consistent here is, and I think that's what's important. The consistent actually is you, Bill. You are the patient, you're being enabled. It sounds to me like you're describing a wonderful journey where the technology gradually took you through, gave you the confidence. You're now able to really do what Hilary is, trying to really, has done for many years. How do we do supported self-management? It sounds like you're describing that, and to Hilary, that's probably music to her ears. And I love the idea, as you say, that you're in a way moving through that, and at times you'll dip back in it. I don't want you to have, but if you do need to, you'll be there because you're informed and you have that wraparound. There is inequalities in the healthcare system. I don't think today's debate is about, or discussion is about that, but equally, I can see what you're describing. Naomi, I'm going to come back in here. I'm just conscious that I'd love to get a bit more from you. So just a slight change of tact. I'm just wondering, we're all, we're here being positive about innovation and commending that, but are you aware of what is in the sort of background to protect patients in a way from innovation, if that makes sense? We want to support it, whatever. Somebody said, how do you decide whether something's good or bad? Or are you aware of, or as a charity, are you doing any work in the sort of work in this space to make sure that this is a safe space for patients, or how to involve them in the whole process? So interested in your view.
No, happy to talk about that. I think as kind of Hilary's alluded to, because things take quite a long time, the things that do end up as part of official recommendations by the NHS or others are normally very, very safe, because we make sure of that before we recommend them. But that's not to say that there aren't things out there that are available online if people go looking around that haven't been regulated properly, or maybe aren't making great recommendations. That's why things like there's the Orca app library, they're great. It means that they've gone through a really kind of valuable evaluation process. They've been looked at by clinicians, by patients, by all different types of people, and they've been found to be good. You can see a little rating. I think things like that are really important. But I do think there is a difference between safety, and that's always really important, and that's always the baseline. But I want us to go further and look at just how usable are they? How do patients actually like them? I think that's really important as well. And I think that's the little bit that tends to be missing sometimes at the moment is you can have something that works really well potentially in a trial or in a pilot study, but we see things that are failing when they go out into real world use and wider use. And I think again that comes down to how have you engaged with different kinds of patients with diverse experiences and diverse viewpoints. How have you worked with patients right at the beginning to design the intervention and plan how it's going to be rolled out. So I think all of this and everything that's been said today, the patient's perspectives that we've been gathering, and also input from people like Bill and Sue, that has to feed into the decisions that are made on procurement, and also what's being accelerated, what is being chosen to be tested, and tested for safety and tested for efficacy. I think that really needs to focus on what patients are saying they want and need. So I've kind of talked around your point a little bit there, just to say I think there's a lot of change happening at the moment in the way that things are regulated and the way that we assess things for safety. One of the big topics of conversation is obviously artificial intelligence and how that's going to be used in healthcare. But I think once things have been approved and given a CE mark or approved by the MHRA, our kind of authority on this, then they are safe to use. But it's knowing, and we definitely have a role as a charity of advising people to look for those marks, look for a CE mark, look for a recommendation from someone like Orca or even NICE, just to check that things are safe. But yeah, usability is a whole other thing on top of that I think we need to look at as well.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And are you doing anything to pull together innovators with patients and healthcare professionals? I mean, is there any work that you're doing behind the scenes?
Yes, so we do a lot of work with people at all different stages, from researchers all the way through to people who are using their products in the NHS to try and engage, make sure that they've engaged really well with patients, and that the best scenario for us is that they're co-designing with patients, which means patients are given power to make decisions over what the product looks like, what the service looks like. And not everybody manages to get to that stage, but as much as possible, we think that patient involvement and engagement throughout the process is really, really important. And we're looking at ways as a charity that we might be able to do more of that and provide more recommendations on what we know patients have told us they really like and has been really helpful for them. Unfortunately, at the moment, we've just kind of analysed the results of our most recent survey, and that's telling us that, unfortunately, as shown by the poll we did at the start, the majority of people with asthma aren't using technology, but of those that are, they're still not really enjoying it. They don't think it's made a big difference to their management. So yeah, I think it summarises well everything we said today, that there's still a little bit of a way to go before we get things that are safe, useful, and that patients really like, and that are accessible, that are widespread, that people can get their hands on.
Thanks, and I'm conscious of time. Bill, I wonder whether or not you want to make a sort of final comment. You've made some very important points today. I'm thinking about any take-home message or anything, a request out there to the community.
Well, it goes back to what Naomi said. I think everybody said it really. A lot of the technology needs to kind of just run in the background, because if you've just got to fill in a spreadsheet of your peak flow numbers, for example, every day, then you're not going to do it. No one's going to do it. You might do it for a week, but it's really boring after that. So somehow the potential for technology to help with asthma, I think, is incredible, but I don't think it's anywhere near ready yet. There's things which would raise other ethical debates. I think inhaler use could be monitored by apps. With smart inhalers, for example. I mean, the biggest problems that I see in asthma care is overuse of SABA inhalers and underuse of preventer inhalers. So to my mind, if you've got a smart inhaler, that could be monitored really easily. And it could, I don't know, I mean, just off the top of my head, if you haven't taken your preventer for 3 days, you'll start getting messages come up on your phone. Why haven't you done this? And if you haven't taken it for another 3 days, then your GP gets a flag. Just, to me, that seems...
Sorry. So, and if you could overlay that with this passive picking up of perhaps symptoms changing as well, then that.
Well, if that just meant you've got the app on your phone and you've taken or haven't taken your inhaler, and your phone picks it up, you haven't done anything. You've just taken or not taken your inhaler, and that could be monitored in the background. That, to me, that would be quite. Well, I say easy. It's easy for other people to do, but
it's well on the way though. So if that's what you're requesting, that's doable. Not 20 years, Hilary, that's doable. Just conscious, Bill. Do you mind if I sort of slip over to Sue for any final comment? But brilliant. Sue?
I just think it's important the patient helps themselves, self-management. I mean, I know people who don't realise how severe their asthma is if they don't take the medication. I've had people say to me, I've got a review at the doctor's, I'm worried. And when I say why, it's, I haven't been taking my inhaler. And then when I say to them, have you been doing it? I haven't got a peak flow monitor. They don't even know what a peak flow monitor is. So they need to go in and ask questions, but they also need to be aware of the fact they need to take the medication, basically. I mean, a lot of people up until COVID, when I said to them, I'm asthmatic, didn't realise how severe asthma can be. They didn't realise it is the killer. They didn't realise how many lung issues there were. And I just think they need to be made more self-aware of how important lung issues are, basically. And you need to be aware of, read your body signs. I mean, a lot of times to me is if I exercise a lot, if my exercise goes down, I know I'm on the verge of having an asthma attack, put it that way. My health is starting to decline, basically. So it's being aware of yourself as well as being aware of what the doctor says.
Lovely, thank you, Sue. Hilary, I'm sure you're desperate to say a quick word.
I'm always desperate to talk, aren't I, Mon? Yes, well, we've talked about preferences, everyone different. I think it's important. Connectivity, absolutely crucial to the way forward. I just want to make one other point, which is implicit in a lot of what's been said, but I'm not sure we've stated it exactly. The monitoring does not make a difference. Monitoring is not what makes a difference. You can monitor yourself into a grave. Monitoring by itself is not what makes a difference. What makes a difference is the feedback you get from it, possibly, but also whether or not that monitoring results in action. And this is where we need to start linking, and this is really where we need to push. I think action plans need to be linked into our monitoring devices so that they say, you are getting worse, do this. Now that is going to mean artificial intelligence in one short. It doesn't have to be scary AI. It can be quite simple, algorithmic kind of AI. Ultimately, it could be more sophisticated, but basically, we must get action plans into monitoring. Monitoring does not change anything.
Absolutely, Hilary. Great, well said. Just as we're winding up, I just want to thank our panelists very much for the discussion, and I think quite a lot of agreement, consensus in that discussion, but getting that from different perspectives. Claire, I wonder if we could very quickly put the poll up to ask our participants a final question about whether or not we believe that digital tools could change asthma care in the future. Hilary, I'll give it more than 6 months, but I won't give it 20 years, all right? So if you could just respond to that, that would be brilliant. And yes, simple yes or no for us there. Thank you.
It says I can't vote.
You can't, I'm afraid. Just to remind you that, you know, what we're saying is please, you know, if you're a patient out there, do ask, do open up the dialogue with your healthcare professionals. You know, that may not just be your GP, it could be nurse, it could be the pharmacist. You know, lots of people involved here that will know different things about the digital space. Some people, as HCPs, are more interested than others, so do ask that question. Also do know that, you know, most practices will be offering alternatives to face-to-face, and you know, we've moved a long way since then, when that wasn't possible. And Claire, did we get a sort of response at all on those on the poll that we can share? Is there anything that we can share? Yes, there we go. So brilliant.
My goodness, 100%.
What we've got to do is just make it happen. So finally, our last slide, Claire, if you didn't mind, I just want to say, do follow our work. And thank you for attending. Thanks once again, all our panelists, for you for giving up your lunchtime. Follow our work, and thank you again.